So this happened at the end of Chapter 4. I was pretty excited to see Huggy, but then I started thinking and then I got concerned. Will Huggy be as scary as he was in Chapter 1? I think we take for granted that he will because he had a strong impact on the player. But so much has changed in the years since Chapter 1, even the way Poppy Playtime chapters are made. It's no longer this small, self-contained indie game, instead only growing bigger both in-game and culturally. So let's look at what we could expect from Huggy in Chapter 5 and consider whether or not he still has it in him to give us a good scare. But before I do, if you find yourself enjoying this video, liking and subscribing really helps me out and means you'll get updates on the next video I do on Poppy or other horror games and media. Please enjoy! First, we need to know what made Huggy so scary in the first place. After re-watching his scenes, I came to a conclusion. One of the main things is Huggy's ability to surprise. I don't just mean in the obvious ways, like how he comes to life and sneaks up on the player. Even his game mechanics were surprising for the time. I bring this up in my very first video on the channel about Miss Delight, but essentially, Huggy plays with our expectations, which is a key feature to what makes him so scary. He's the first monster we meet in Chapter 1. Arguably, this is an unfair advantage he has over the other monsters, but the way it's handled is unique to him. When Huggy attacks us, he upends our expectations, firstly from a visual standpoint. He's intimidatingly tall and slow-moving. When we first enter the vents, we think we're safe. After all, how can this tall monster we just left behind us get into the vent? Oh lord, there he is. He's now in front of us, moving fast, and has somehow squeezed down to fit inside the vents. This gives us a sense of flexibility to Huggy that no other monster has, aside from maybe Doughy and Mummy. But we expect a character like Doughy to be able to do this because he's made of dough. But with Huggy, the devs play upon our lack of understanding of this monster, meaning that the surprise he can fit into the vents adds to the horror of the moment. Unlike Mummy and Doughy, there is no Huggy videotape that starts Chapter 1. So we have no idea what to expect and no idea of the monster's abilities. It takes advantage of this to throw us off, and by changing the expectations in such a short space of time, it's more memorable and unsettling. We can see the devs trying to create similar changes with other monsters. Mummy changes to look crazier, Catnap becomes nightmarish, and Doughy becomes this. But I still think Huggy's animations remain the most organic and naturally scary. He doesn't change very much at all, really. It's mostly his body movements. The animators did an amazing job here by taking advantage of his body type and finding these smooth transitions as Huggy adapts to a different space, which adds to the threat level. It feels like we cannot escape this monster. I would love if the games did more of this, especially with the lesser enemies. It's extra work to animate a monster moving in different spaces, but from Huggy we can see how well this paid off. In a way, each game has tried to follow this principle of flexible, organic monsters. This is one of the things that makes it different from, say, FNAF. Mummy stretches her arms through vents to grab you, Doughy can squeeze through spaces, although sadly his flexible nature is completely unused in his boss fight, and Catnap only really shifts form due to nightmares. But only Huggy has really been successful in my opinion. Why is that when what he does is so simple? Well, the creators of Poppy Playtime have stated that they want to make the games bigger and bolder, and I think this reflects on how they now treat monster designs and movements. It can't be that we have this simple monster design that barely changes, it has to be bigger, crazier looking. And we can't simply escape anymore by running away, we have to face the monster head on in a boss fight. Chapters 1 and 2 have their monster die by accident. Chapters 3 and 4 have the player actively kill the monster in a boss fight. Not only is this less scary, but it feels as if the creators now have an expectation that the player wants a boss fight. Boss fights tend to make a monster less scary in my experience, because you're forced to face them over and over again until you win. Huggy's ability to constantly change our expectations made him so memorable, but he also embodies simplicity. And since the new chapters are going for bigger, more complicated game mechanics, this simplicity is lost. The Poppy games always try to walk this fine line between horror and puzzling. Puzzles have always had a place in horror games, but a good horror game has to know when to hold off on its puzzles and mechanics to allow for a scarier moment to take place. It's very easy for an overcomplicated mechanic to ruin the fear. And we have to consider how short Chapter 1 was. Sometimes this is to the benefit of indie developers because by being confined to such small games, they have to come up with more creative ways to make it an enjoyable experience. But with the current Poppy leads wanting the games to be bigger, bolder, I wonder if they're getting further away from what works so well. And while future chapters may have more story, characters and environments, they're not guaranteed to be as scary, as they juggle many different aspects and keep experimenting with new mechanics. This means that we have a lot more mixed feelings towards these later chapters because they feel uneven in terms of good versus bad moments. It's a lot harder to mess up a smaller game because your focus is so much stronger, so you can really emphasize the important parts such as the horror. And I want to talk about Kissy for a moment. Kissy has this haunting effect on the player because she's used to remind us of Huggy. There was a certain tension built by this, culminating in Huggy's return at the end of Chapter 4. This makes for a really cool parallel and adds to the impact of Huggy's return. However, when it comes to scaring the player, the downside is that Kissy may have desensitized us to Huggy. It's often said that the scariest monsters are ones we don't see. And while it's true that these are two different characters with some visual differences, they are the same type of monster. And so you have to wonder if Huggy's return would have been scarier had we not been exposed to Kissy for so long. I'd still rather we had Kissy because she adds so much to the world building and story, but for this video it's something to consider. Through Kissy we come to know Huggy, and the more we know a monster, the less scary they become. Then again, on a more positive note, it does feel as if Huggy is the one element the creators have down to a T. He's used well in advertisements, in-game references, and especially the short videos done on the mob's YouTube channel. It seems as if they fully understand not only Huggy's cultural impact, but what makes him work. This tape is still extremely unsettling and scary. To me, this is the scariest thing to come out of the entire game. They have proven to be experimental with their monsters for better or worse, and this means there is potential to do something unexpected with Huggy that's genuinely scary. But we could also see some new mechanics with Huggy that just don't work. But now the franchise has become so much bigger, it runs the risk of becoming overfilled with puzzles and mechanics and story, which take away from its potential for genuine horror. So will Huggy be as scary in Chapter 5? If Huggy becomes a more complex character, then this will make for a better story experience. But if we want a scary monster, we have to think about how they are used, and we have to ask, what is the point of said character? If we take Silent Hill's Pyramid Head, for example, this guy has both theme and story importance, which requires him to be this scary, unknowable demon that hunts the main character. This type of monster is very limited and a pretty black and white villain. But that's what makes him so effective and scary. I think Huggy will be scary, but how well he's utilised depends on whether the creators can return to that simplicity of Chapter 1, which made Huggy so effective, while also exploring bigger ideas around this character. I think you can have it both ways because much of the game has monsters fixed to their own sections, allowing them to try different things with different enemies. What Huggy really runs the risk of is becoming too big for his own good. He's had such a cultural impact that he runs the risk of being overused and overcomplicated, but so far they haven't done him wrong. So we'll just have to wait and see. Thanks for watching.